Hi, Mark from Sharkbait here. Game plan this morning is to go over the Daiwa spinning reels a little bit, and then if we have some time we'll get into the conventionals. We are now into, officially, 2017. It's January 4th or 5th, somewhere around there. It's been cool in California. Maybe not the weather we're seeing in Texas and other parts of the country, but it is cool. We'll probably only get up to about 60 today. But we're not talking about weather. We're here to talk about Daiwa spinning reels. And so that's the game plan. It's been a long time since I've done a product video. Only a couple fishing charters, but need to get back on the product side. In ICAST 2016, Daiwa showed off a couple pieces that were pretty exciting. And maybe a little bit before that, but the Daiwa BGs, the black golds, not the old black golds that we've been familiar with since the 1980s. Those are still in the line, but the new series of BG reels was introduced at ICAST, along with the new series of Saltist reels. Very appropriate to go over those pieces because they're all available at this point in time in 2017. The BGs came in first, probably around September, and then the Saltist followed up. Basically, two interesting pieces. What we see in the marketplace is manufacturers, Daiwa, Penn, others. My God, they've got a ton of different spinning reels, and I personally don't get it. Except maybe it's for different retailers, so somebody can feel like they've got something somebody else doesn't have. I don't know. And it could be that there's just some specific applications that me, being an ignorant West Coast kind of guy, doesn't quite pick up on. But reality is, there's only so much different types of fishing that we do, and we stock what we sell. I'm not a super rich guy. Started this business up, on a shoestring, if that. Maybe this borrowed shoestring. So we look at the inventory real carefully as far as what we want to stock and the reasons why we want to stock it. Certainly with manufacturers we do business with, we can order and post every single thing they make. But typically that's not the way we operate. We get behind something, see how it fits in, get behind it, and that's what we try and introduce folks to. We don't try and have everything as a line listing from a manufacturer. But we do go through the merchandise and see what makes sense in what application, and then that's what we try and support. Typically that has reflected more the local fishing that we have out here on the West Coast, but the reality is with Sharkbait at this point in time, we've been around for 20 years, and we fill orders from people across the country and all over the world. So we do have to look at things with open eyes, but the reality is we still, there's a pretty narrow range of what we see that people need to fish, and so we need to be able to explain why certain things make sense in various applications. Okay, here's a mess of spinners. Now, first on the docket, maybe I should move some of these other guys out of the way, but on, I'll call it the lower end, we've been stocking the Lexa reels now for a few years, and they're most known for their conventional series reels. The smaller bait casters have been very, very popular and well priced. The Lexus Spinners also were a piece that we saw with a good deal of inshore application, where they made a lot of sense. You pick up a few of the typical, the Daiwa features that have been plus, the air rotor design, as you can see, saving some weight, very well balanced. The bail is hollow stainless. I think they have probably some great name for that too. Air bail, of course. Okay, big deal. That's not any wonderful thing. In my estimation, the bail's a bail. But it's a nice straight ahead piece. Now, extended use for the guys that do a lot of inshore fishing. From a corrosion standpoint, inshore fishing, a lot of the guys doing that maybe don't take the best care of their gear, and also the conditions are harsh when you're in the surf. While you do have some mag seal within this piece, the majority of the bearings, and I think you've got about 5 on the little Lexa spinners, they're not CRBB, they're not corrosion resistant bearings. And so we've heard back from a couple of clients that while they've loved the reels, and 2 of the guys here that do a lot of surf fishing for corbs and surf perch, corbs being the target, You know, those fellas, bought them, both Beta and Brandon. They both have fished them. They both like the reel a lot, but the reality is they have to be on top of it in terms of maintenance. The bearings are not the CRBBs, they're standard. So that is one point of concern. I'd say for somebody who's doing heavy use, we definitely want to get into the better bearings. Or be more on top of it from a service standpoint. So that is the little Daiwa Lexa Spinner. Where we go from there typically is going to be, and what we recommend to folks, while the Lexas are about, let's see, maybe 120 bucks or so, the Ballistic is the better piece. The Ballistics run closer to 2 bills. We pick up more bearings, but the main thing is you got a half dozen CRBB bearings in here. So you've got 8 bearings on the piece. You can just feel it's a smoother reel. They're available in a number of sizes, from little tiny guys, on up. The big benefit and what you pick up for the 2 bills, most of the other features are straight across, like the air rotor, the way the bail is designed. You've got sealing on these guys, as we did on the Lexa. The big benefit is the bearings, and for those of us that are going to be fishing inshore more seriously and more often, it's maybe 80 bucks difference. It's not quite double the money, but you get something for it, and that something is probably going to be longer term use and enjoyment from the reels. And now we get into really the 2 big announcements from Daiwa at ICAST on the spinning side of things. The new BGs, and they're available in a big range of sizes. Popularly priced. They're not ridiculous from a dollar standpoint. In fact, they're doggone inexpensive. These reels, my gosh, you're at about 110 bucks or so on up to maybe 130. It's an awful lot of reel for the money, on these guys. Again, we have the air rotor design. You've got some sealing on the piece. They're very smooth. It's hard body, so it's basically it's a metal, cast metal body that's being used. In terms of bearing count, we're at 7 bearings on these guys, straight across. They go all the way up from like a little 1500 type size. This is a 2000, so there's one smaller than this within their line, all the way up to an 8000. This is a 6500 size here, but they go up to an 8000 and all points in between. There are like 8-9 different models within the BG series of reels. These are going to be big for Daiwa for the next several years. Awful lot of technology packed into a very, very nice reel at a very popular price point. So why would a person want to go to the Saltist instead of the BGs? That's a big question. But similarly to where we were looking at the Ballistics versus the Lexa, it's a matter of bearings. When we get into the Saltist series, these are more designed for heavier use, offshore as well as inshore. The big difference is going to lie in the bearings. We pick up the CRBB bearings. Okay, these are a few of the Saltist series spinners that came out at the same time at ICAST in 2016. And why would a person spend, again, almost double the money, closer to 200 bucks for the Saltist spinner versus the BGs? My gosh, they both are metal. They both have a bunch of bearings. You've got 6+1 bearings on the BG series, and great for inshore, it's in light duty offshore type of fishing and freshwater fishing. A lot of these guys will be used freshwater just like the old PGs, and they'll have some crossover. But here's the downside. They're not making use of the CRBB bearings or the corrosion resistant bearings, which we like to see and which we have seen make a difference as far as long-term satisfaction with the reels for those guys that are actually out there fishing the salty stuff. If you are on top of your maintenance with a standard bearing, so be it. You'll be fine. But the CRBBs will help you longer term without having to replace bearings as corrosion occurs. And it's bound to, the saltwater, especially if you're doing some inshore stuff and surf stuff, you can't help but get some salt water in there. No matter how well they try and seal it, it's going to happen. The Saltist series picks up the CRBBs. You pick up an extra bearing. We're working there at probably 8 bearings across the board to 9 bearings. You'll have a roller bearing. I'm not counting that one. So with the roller bearing, you're at 9 bearings versus, say, 7 bearings on the BGs. It is more sealed. There is magnetic oil being used, or the Mag Seal system, which is a ferrofluid, to help keep the saltwater intrusion out. The CRBBs are huge. Air rotor is a common feature that is being used in more of the Daiwa reels these days on the rotor design. Same with the bail design. And you can see it's a manual bail on the big pieces. They do go down in size. There's one piece in the line that's smaller than this little guy. And again, here it's a trip. When we get to the bigger stuff, it typically is a manual bail in terms of operation. 4,500 to 6,500 size, they top out at 65s on this series. I take that back. They go up to 8,000 size too, so they get bigger. Primarily, you've got 2 bodies on the bigger reels, and then you'll have 2 different spool sizes. So 2 bodies cover 4 reels, and the little guys have got a couple of different size bodies there as well. They have a little bit of rubberized type tape on the spool, as you can see, and that is allowing the braid to get a little bit better grip when you spool the things up, and less chance of slip. It's doing kind of what we've done here in a way with the finger tape, which is a non-absorbent surgical tape that we typically back the reels with. Some other guys will use mono first and then put up the braid on. A little more hassle than what the benefit is. If it's done properly, the tape works out well, and this works out very well too as far as keeping that braid from rotating on the spool. So why would you want the Saltist? The bearings. That's the main reason. And for a difference in price of a couple $100 or of say $80 or so, from a long-term standpoint, I think the Saltists make a heck of a lot of sense. Again, they're a reasonable reel at a couple $100 versus, say, 110, 130 or whatever on the BGs. The BGs, awful lot of bang for the buck, and if there's more freshwater oriented use with light saltwater use, I think the BGs are just dandy. But for those of us who fish saltwater primarily, or exclusively, the Saltists are the only way to go. So that's a little background on the spinners. Not going to get into the real high end from Daiwa and some of the other niche pieces. The way we see it here within their line, makes an awful lot of sense to be playing with the Lexa and then stepping up to the better bearings. And then, excuse me, from our perspective, it makes an awful lot of sense on the spinner lineup to go from the Lexa to the Ballistics to the BGs and then to the Saltists. Makes plenty of sense. Around 110, 130 bucks or so, closer to 2 bills. Again, 110 to probably, I don't know, 130 bucks or so on the BGs, and then typically closer to 2 bills, on the Saltist series. And in both cases, from 4 models, the difference really is the bearings. And that's a matter of your application, which one makes the most sense. So that's the deal with the Daiwa spinners. Next up will be Daiwa conventional reels for 2017. P.S. You'll notice I didn't speak much about drags on the spinning reels. And that's because drag ratings on spinning reels, in my humble estimation, is a bunch of bunk. There's a reasonable amount of drag we're going to pull. Drag needs to be appropriate for the line test we're going to fish. Everybody knows, most people, you fish the reel at 25 to 30% of whatever the line test is that you have spooled on that reel. So, much like in the 1970s with wattage wars and stereo gear, there's a bit of that going on with respect to reels. And I can understand that maybe a little bit more on the conventional side of things, on 2-speed gears, for instance. But in the world of spinning reels, given a higher gear ratio and a single, speed that typically is relatively fast, it's 6-to-1 more often than not, or close to that, there's only so much drag you're going to hold. On the guys fishing tuna, cow-sized tuna, they're working on a long-range boat. They're working at up to maybe 30 pounds of drag is average, and as the spool goes down, that number goes up. Some of the guys that are studs out there, fishing the rail hard, maybe they're fishing at 40 pounds. But I will challenge you to fight a fish of consequence at more than, say, 30 to 40 pounds worth of drag. Personally, I'll fish 30. Yeah, I know that's going to bump up, and I can always put a thumb down if I need to towards the end game, or up the lever on a conventional reel. On a spinning reel, having drag measurements, 30 pounds, for instance, for guys that are fishing, 20-pound line, it's silly. Yeah, it's just silly. It's horsepower races for no effect, with speed limits. It's like the wattage measurements, 1,000 watts of power. Well, it's peak power. What is it doing on a root mean square or RMS power? Same routine on reels. So I'm not going over the drag specs. Bottom line on those Daiwa reels, they have a hell of a lot more drag than what you need, and well enough drag to fish the line tests that they're supposed to fish, probably double. So there's headroom that way. But don't get caught up in the drags. That's my PS.